Arden Labs, specializing in high-performance software consulting, training, staffing, and development. Welcome to Module 12, Testing. Let's get started with Lesson 12.1, Basic Unit Testing.
What's brilliant about Go is that it comes built in with a testing tool that we'll access from the front end called Go Test. Now, there's lots of ways that you can write unit tests. So I'm going to show you what I do using just the basic tooling that comes with Go and the basic tests package. I really don't recommend bringing in third-party test packages to do testing, primarily because it just becomes a dependency for other people to download and run your tests. And I really don't think you need to do that. But one thing I will ask is that, at least as a team, have some level of consistency on how everybody writes tests, because there's nothing more frustrating than everybody writing tests differently and then you having to maintain or go into a test, a test function that really isn't the way you like to test. So it becomes really important to have some consistency. So let's just start with a real basic test here. And I'm going to show you how I leverage the idea of given when should. Now, not everybody likes the idea of given when should, but I think it's kind of cool because I can focus on why we need the test, the data we're using for this test, and what should happen. And then it should also give us a consistent verbose output that we can look at when things are successful, but will automatically show when things are failing. All right, let's go look at the code. So we're going to do some basic unit testing around the HTTP package and using the testing package. You can see here that I've also defined some constants on lines 12 and 13 that will help me produce things like checkboxes and little x's. So checks and x's will be kind of cool. So the first core thing about a test is that it has to be in a file that's named _test. And I'm showing you that up here at the top. Go is about convention over configuration. It always has been. And the convention of the file name is what's driving the testing tool to know what a test file is. Now, you also now have to have functions that start with the word test, and they have to be exported. So the testing tool will be scanning this file for functions that start with test, and also that take that testing T pointer as the parameter. That's going to indicate that this is a test function. One thing to note is after the word test, you can either use an underscore, which I'm not a fan of because we don't really do that in Go, or the next letter has to be capitalized. If you're using a lowercase letter, the testing tool will not find this function. So make sure that's capitalized. So this is our test download function. And what it's going to do is help us test the ability to download some content off the internet. And on line 17, you're going to see that we're going to try to download the blog content off the Arden Labs website. And we're also expecting to get a 200. So it's good sometimes to set up your input and your outputs at the top of a unit test. And that's what I'm doing right here. Now, again, I like the idea of given when should. So I'm doing some special formatting here that you don't necessarily have to do. But what's nice is that T variable that we're getting as a parameter, it has an API of log, error, and fatal. And that's what we're going to use. So log is for a verbose output, anything that you want to kind of comment or trace about this test. The error function is going to say that this test has failed, but we're going to continue to execute the code inside the function. And fatal means that this test has failed and we're done, move on to another function. So we're going to use all three of those APIs here in this code. So the very first line that you see on line 20 is our given comment. And the given comment for me is why would this test even exist? So given the need to test downloading content, that's my given, that's in the first. And I also use extra code blocks to separate the given and the whens with the shoulds, just so visually I can read all of this. All right, the next line on 22 is the when. And for me, when is showing us the data that we're using. So what we're saying that when we're checking this URL for this particular status code. So I love that about the when. I can look very clearly at the output and know what my input was and what my potential output is. Sometimes I just show input. And you'll see here that I'm marking this as test 0 as part of this unit test called download. Now, inside that code block for when, I'm now showing the should aspects. And the should is all the things that we're testing and what should occur with that test. So the first thing we're doing is the line 24. We're doing the get call on that URL, and then we're checking the error. It is so important that you check errors all the way through your unit tests as if this was production code. Can't tell you how many times I or somebody else has forgotten to check the error and it's actually erroring out, and you don't realize that this test really is failing. Okay, so we call get, we get our response, we get our error, we check to make sure that there is no error. If there is, we're now in a fatal situation. There's no reason to execute anything else if we can't even get that URL. So we'll fatal F, or we'll go into the log. And fatal's also like an exit, so there's no return, I don't need it. And one thing that I do is the error case and the log case, if you notice, almost are identical in terms of the output. The only difference is on the fatal is that we're going to do that X and we're going to display the error. But I like the idea of being able to scan the output regardless if there's a failure or there's success. So the more consistency there is with just small marker changes, it's going to help you be able to help you scan this output and know what's going on. So we're going to check the get call. If it succeeds, we do what we're supposed to do. We close that response body. And then in this case, we're just checking to see what the status is. Is it a 200? And in this case, if it is, we log true. Life is good. If it's not, then I'm here using the else clause. It's one of the very few places in Go I'll use an else clause, and we're doing the error. Again, I don't need the else clause on a fatal because that's an exit, an automatic exit out. All right, so we've got this test function here. Let's go and try to run it. So I'm now back in the browser here, and you can see that we're in that example1 folder for the test. So I can do just a Go test, and it will find all those _test files. It will run them. In this particular case, it just says pass, and that it took almost 600 milliseconds to run. But if I want to see that verbose output, I can just use the -V switch, and now what we're going to get is all that verbose output that I was putting together. And this is why I like writing tests the way that I do, because it becomes very clear here on the given, all the different tests that we're executing, in other words, maybe all the different inputs / outputs that we're using, and then the idea that everything has succeeded with those check marks. Now, what happens if I turn around and let's just force something to fail? So let's say I just made a mistake here. We're going to say that the status code doesn't equal this status code. Or even better yet, let's just say that we were expecting a 204 for some reason. Now, when I run the test, even without the -V, you're going to see that we're going to pop into that verbose mode. You're going to see here that it failed right there. And you can see the X right there, that on line 35, we should have received a 204 and we received a 200. So I'm really trying to show you here that you want to come up with some sort of formatting. You don't need third-party packages to do this, but something that's going to let you scan and identify very quickly what is going on. This is how I do it right here. Let's fix that again. Another thing just about the Go test call there is you can filter out test functions if you have multiple. So I could say just run everything with down. Boom, there it is. It just ran that. I can even do that with the -V, and we're going to be fine there. There we are. So this is our basic unit testing. We can filter those functions on the command line as I'm showing you. I'm leveraging the given when should using separate code blocks. And in this particular test, right now we just have one single input expecting one single output.